The day's other news, and the whole issue of coal seam gas, especially in suburban Sydney, has long been a flashpoint, igniting fiery passions and furious opposition. Just 2 weeks ago, the Premier was insistent that there would be no policy change. Which brings us to today's spectacular backflip and back down. 10's Josh Murphy is at State Parliament with more on this story tonight. Josh, so what's triggered this remarkable change of heart?
Well, Sandra, the Premier admits that he's been intensely lobbied by his nervous MPs, especially those in southwestern Sydney. Now, he knew about a week and a half ago that he was going to change his mind on coal seam gas policy, and 10 News understands that government officials held meetings where they told energy providers that drilling near homes had made the coal seam gas industry unsalvageable. It's pictures like this, gas wells appearing on people's doorsteps, that finally spooked the Premier, prompting this.
Saying that there'll be no new coal seam gas activity in areas zoned residential.
There'll now be a 2-kilometre exclusion zone around homes. Horse studs and vineyards will also get protection.
This announcement today is the beginning of the end for coal seam gas in New South Wales and potentially Australia.
It's been a toxic fight.
Get a job, you blood. I have a job, mate, and I've been looking after the jobs of our kids.
Farmers arrested after hijacking a mining conference and protesters climbing city buildings. But all along, the O'Farrell government's backed its own policy, which was only unveiled 6 months ago.
The process that we've arrived at the moment, we think, is a good balance.
Which stumbled off balance today.
It's a bit... yeah, it's a bit...
A bit confusing. The gas industry claims it will stifle the state's energy market.
We had what I thought was a fair and reasonable agreement, very high standards, probably the highest in Australia, and that we had to meet. A few weeks later, before ink is even dry, we have a new set of rules. Which
the industry claims will increase prices, a potential rise in electricity of more than 7%, and gas bills heading north as much as 25%.
Well, of course they'd say that. We're on about setting boundaries. Business, look, as I say, a business like our children need boundaries.
Boundaries which, according to others, aren't strict enough.
The government should push pause until we have conclusive evidence that we are not impacting on our water.
The state's chief scientist and engineer will review the potential impact of CSG drilling on water catchments to determine if drilling under drinking supplies can go ahead. Now, a report on that will be finalised by mid-year, but as to whether this decision will put upward pressure on gas prices, the government denies that and claims that there will still be a viable CSG industry in New South Wales. Sandra.
Thank you, Josh. Well, the bad news is, though, that the new rules apply only to new exploration zones. John Hill reports now on the Sydney community stuck with gas in their backyards, and they're still fighting the fight.
These new homes on Sydney's southwestern outskirts, developed and marketed by the O'Farrell government, but in the middle of AGL's coal seam gas field. The government says there'll be no expansion of the field. Residents aren't convinced.
AGL has a petroleum production lease for half the scenic hills. They haven't been able to use it because they didn't have development consent. But there's nothing in the policy that talks about development consent.
AGL has been drawing gas from coal seams in the area for almost a decade. The government's policy change has come too late to stop this coal seam gas well at Spring Farm near Camden. It's just a few hundred metres from a new housing estate.
Does this mean that AGL could still draw gas from under people's houses as long as the wells stop 2 kilometres away? I mean, we don't know that.
Around the state, those opposed to coal seam gas are cautiously optimistic about the policy backflip, but want more detail.
It doesn't do one thing to protect prime agricultural land. The strategic regional use plans were meant to actually give a gateway process to help protect some of those prime food producing spots.
While the government says the ban applies only to new CSG exploration, there's no restriction on developing gas fields in Sydney's water catchment.
When accidents do happen, and they will happen, wastewater could get into the catchment.
Drilling for coal seam gas has been approved just a kilometre from Warragamba Dam. Locals are demanding the government reverse that decision as well. John Hill, 10 News.